Hiya, I'm just going to quickly show you how to do arrays of records in Python. Arrays of records is just an alternative method to organize all the data you've got in your program rather than parallel arrays. A couple of things you need to know just for the purpose of like the assignment to be able to do it practically, and there are a couple of things in here you'll need for the exam. So let's go. First of all, if you're going to do an array of records, well, in fact, if you're going to do records at all, then you need to import a library here. So this is only needed for the practical stuff. We're likely to be able to create records, and we do from data classes. Just be careful with this. Import data class singular. Okay. See, that's why you need to be careful. When I do it, I didn't notice the first time, and it had auto completed that to classes. From data classes plural, import data class. Okay. Now, just up here, whenever we do import statements, it's good practice to do them at the top. It's just convention, really. And the same here, we're going to create a record structure. So this record structure could be used for variables as well, but for higher, you have to use it for arrays. So you're going to do arrays of records. In the coursework, 50-50 chance, might be parallel arrays, might be array of records. So let's create a record structure, and you have to put in these default sort of values for the fields. So this bit here, you also need this in the exam. You need to be able to write this in the exam, this chunk of code. So you do at data class. I think you can probably get away without that in the exam, actually. This is the important bit. Class, and then you give your record structure a name. Now I tend to go for something like whatever record. So for this example, I'm just going to use this. I used it for parallel arrays, although I've changed it slightly here. Some Olympians, some Great British Olympians. So I'm going to call it Olympian record. And then you do a colon, and then we know whenever we do a colon in Python, basically it means next line needs to be indented. Everything that's going to be inside that is going to be indented. And then the syntax is we put the name of a field we want. So I'm going to go for name for the first one. And then you do a colon, and then you put the data type. So this is going to be string. So str for string, int for integer, float for real numbers. And then we do equals. You know what, I haven't even tried this without the equals and without giving an initial value. Probably should have. Might try that later. But that's it. We're saying we're setting up name as a field in this record structure. It's going to store strings, and the default value for it will be just an empty string. And then we can go ahead and do the rest. So the other ones I've got, I don't actually particularly need them in the same order that they are in my data file, but makes more sense, a bit easier to work with. Okay, and then I've got golds, the number of golds they've got I've added into this, just so I could have an integer in there. So I'll give that the default value of 0. Okay, now I have created my record structure, so I can go about using this Olympian record structure for things. So I'm going to create a procedure here to read. So let's read in a CSV. So I'll call it read CSV into array of records. Descriptive, but not very concise. And I always do this where I'm having to pass the file path in. You don't have to. I just like that. I think it makes it a bit more usable, reusable elsewhere, but you know, up to you. Okay, so this is the other bit that you have to do in the coursework, and also you have to be able to do in the exam. And this is where we we declare an array. We set up an array of records. So we've got our record structure. So rather than just setting up like an array of strings for forename, an array of strings for surname, we're going to set up an array of Olympian records. So let's put in a suitable comment. Initialize a local array. I'm just setting it up in here of records. And we need to know how many records we want to create. So I'm going to do this, my little thing here has just 5 records in it. At a higher level, you'll always know how many records there are going to be. Okay, so it's an array of records. It's going to store 5 records. So this is the way we do it. Now, like I say, I always go with the convention something record for my record structure. And then it's up to you what you go for here. I try to stick with the same system every time. So you could just go with Olympians. It's an array of Olympians, right? Or you could go with Olympian records, which I have to say I quite often go for, but easy to get muddled up when you've got one thing that's singular and one thing that's plural. So maybe I'll just go with Olympians here. And we do Olympians equals, and then in square brackets, so if you imagine that, that sets up an array called Olympians. We know how to do that. But to make sure it's Olympian record, there's this funny bit we have to do. So I have to say what the structure is. So the data structure, Olympian record. Put those empty brackets there. And then I do this funny bit. It's like the start of for next. Sorry, it's not for next in Python. It's the start of a for loop. So I can do for I in range 5. And then close the square brackets. Okay, so that will now have set up our array of records, 5 records. The array is called Olympians. You need to be able to write that in an exam, and you need to be able to write that in an exam. The rest of this stuff is really just practical. Okay, the rest of it is very, very, very similar to what I did in my example to read in data and read it into parallel arrays. It's totally the same idea here. So we're going to open the file. I mean, you could copy and paste huge chunks of this, but for this first one, I'm just going to sort of go through it so I can explain it. So this is our usual open file thing. Remember, in the exam, you just need to say open whatever file. This is what you need. So I normally do as file name, as file. I'll do as file name. There we go. So that's just a standard bit. Let's scroll down a little here. And then we're going to do the same as when we did parallel arrays. Okay, so read in each line from the file to an array called data. So the array doesn't have to be called data, it's just what I go for. So data equals, so we do whatever we'd put up here. I put file name. That's like my little alias for the file, the open file. That's how I'm going to refer to it. And then we do dot, and it has to be read lines for this approach. Same as when we did parallel arrays. And then, so is this. We're going to loop through each line of data. So this bit, all you really need to understand is how to amend it for different numbers of fields and so on. So this is always going to be the same for I in range len data. So that is basically saying loop through each index of this array called data. So data will have in it index 0 will be that in a string, index 1 will be that in a string, and so on. That's what read line has done, set each of those up. So it's going to have index 0 to 4, each one's going to be a line of that as a string, and now we're going to go through each line in turn. and we're going to do exactly the same as before. We're going to, like, you know, get rid of extra spaces, start and end, just in case they cause inconvenience sometimes, or basically errors that are sometimes a bit hard to spot. So we just use strip. Oops, I always forget to put the brackets in there. And then we're going to split the current record we're looking at. So like the first time through the loop, we're going to have that in a string, Nicola Adams boxing 2. And we just need to split it up. So split the current record. And I'm going to store that in like a new array called fields. We do dot split, and then we have to tell it what to use as a delimiter. So I'm going to say use a comma, please. So fields will now have fields is an array, and the first time through loop it'll have Nicola at index 0, Adams at index 1, boxing at index 2, 2 at index 3. And then we're going to do this bit where we sort the individual fields into the array of records. So this again is very similar to how we did in parallel arrays, but the syntax we're going to use here you're going to need to be able to use in the exam. So I called my array of records Olympians, I went for on line 17 there. So it's an array, so whenever we refer to it we're going to have to put in square brackets an index number, and I'm looping through as it happens, so I'm on index 0. So in index 0 of Olympians, and then I do a dot, and then I say which field I'm interested in. So in the forename field I want to put whatever is in this little array I've created here at index 0. So taking that array which had index 0 had Nicola, and put it into the forename field of the current Olympians record. And I'm going to do a very similar thing for each of these. So Olympians I every time, but the next time I'm going for the surname field, and I'm taking whatever is at index 1 in that little array. I'll do a separate video just to sort of help explain what's going on there. But like I say, really, so you need to be familiar with this syntax where you do, for an array of records, you do the name of the array, then the index number, dot, and the field name. You need to be familiar with that syntax and be able to use that. But this whole chunk of code I'm doing, really, you just need to be able to adapt it. So, whoops. And what was it? Golds. I think it was. And then, so this one, I want it to be treated as a number rather than a string, a whole number. So rather than just doing field brackets 3, I'm going to make sure I also convert it to an int by putting int around it. Okay, and then that's it. So it should loop through each of the lines and split them up. So let's just return Olympians. Okay. Once the loop's finished, notice that's not inside the loop. So it does all the looping. Once it's finished, it's filled up that array of records, and we get Olympians. If you want to test it, well, we'll come to testing it in a second. So let's create our main subprogram as usual. So in here I'm going to have a local array called Olympians here as well, and I want it to store whatever value gets returned from this. So it's called CSV into array of records, and I need to pass in the file path. So let's go and get it. So I could just copy and paste this. That would be sensible. But for some reason I'm not. And my data file is called olympians2.csv. And you might remember, if you're doing it in Notepad++, you either need to make all these forward slashes or do double backslashes. Either one. This is why I should have copied and pasted it. But there we go. Not too bad. And then let's do the thing we always forget to do, or I do anyway, and actually remember to call main. Okay, so when I run the program, defines the first, well, when I run the program, it's going to import that, it's going to set up this structure, it'll define what happens when we do read CSV into array of records, it'll define what happens when we do main, and then here's an actual instruction for it, do main, it'll go off, do this, do that thing, that'll work through that, it'll return Olympians, and that will be displayed in here. Oh, you're welcome, Hanako. Right, at the moment we're not going to see anything happen, but let's check if it runs. No! Did you mean fields? Probably. Yeah, right there. I made a mistake on line 39. Okay, let's try again. Right, no errors. That's good. Let's see if it's actually worked. So we can still do, same as always, I can just do print, like same with any array. This isn't the way the SQA would want you doing it in like the coursework or anything. They want you to work through it line by line, but it's good for testing. Let's just display what's in here. Okay, so you can see, hopefully, the first index, and so it's showing me the entire Olympians array, and the first index is an Olympian record, which is that structure I set up, and it's showing me inside there, in the forename field, we've got Nicola, in surname, Adams, in sport, boxing, and golds 2. Notice the golds does not have the quotes around it because it's not a string. And then the next index, so it's done it all, seems to have read it in. That is basically it, but I will just again quickly demonstrate how can we show just one particular part of it. So if I want to just display one of them, should be able to do that. So that's in the Olympians array. It'll show me all the fields in index 2. And if I want to display a particular field, I can do forename, for example. There we go. Okay, so you need to be really familiar with that syntax. Name of the array, in square brackets the index, dot the field. Okay, we can of course use that just like parallel arrays. We can now do various sort of standard algorithms. I'll maybe do a quick couple of examples of that in a moment. Okay, hope that's helped. See ya.